Thanks for visiting MidwestSwampWatch.com. I'm Rick Weibel. Today I'll be your host and we'll be reviewing Mike Lindell's data on frankspeech.com. And the basic premise that we're going to approach today's conversation with is, do Minnesota counties pass basic security tests? And let's get into this. So first, the journey kind of begins when we look at Mike Lindell's website here, the biglie.frankspeech.com. And you'll see that website over here. And we pulled it up. And then what's interesting is that you can actually select by state. And when you select Minnesota, for example, you'll get this website or web page that shows up, where we see that they've got this presentation here of some vote totals and the truth based upon some vote totals here. And then what was interesting that kind of piqued our curiosity was that there's timestamps that are labeled here, and then we see some source IP addresses and then destination IP addresses that are tied to the counties within the state of Minnesota. And then over on the right-hand side, there's these vote totals that are there that were potential injections or subtractions or whatever that is. And we see that all 87 counties are listed in here. And so that's kind of where our questioning started. Just for clarity so that people understand, I have a computer consulting business that I've been running in Minnesota for over 26 years. Over the last 6 months, I've been named the CIO for D3 Defense. It's a new security company here in the upper Midwest, filed in South Dakota. Originally was in Minnesota, but has moved over to South Dakota. That's where I currently live as well, as of 3.5 years ago. And what's is different about D3 Defense, and this isn't a commercial, but people do need to understand clarity. D3 Defense kind of looks at defense and security in 3 different areas. One is data, one is physical, and the third one is cultural security. And people will ask us, well, what's the cultural security? That's a little bit confusing. In short, the best way to describe it is, we like to have conversations with the management team that if you treat your employees like garbage, they're not going to care about the other two. And so having a culture of respect, accountability, as well as continuous improvement is very important. And when you have that, you'll have better buy-in and better due diligence of your employees that will actually care for the organization because you care for them. And they will care about being due diligence about daily backups, premise security, making sure that doors are locked and making sure that files are taken care of, and all of that. And so that type of culture is important. And so that in itself kind of gave me some access to partnerships where we're able to kind of do some of the next steps here that we're going to explain as we go through these slides. But what's really important in getting back to Mike Lindell's data is you can actually go on the internet and look at the various states that are there, and you can see some of the points that we're going to be bringing up in our presentation today. The first part that is pretty interesting is I want to make sure that people understand that an IP address of the counties in Minnesota, think of them as addresses to your house, a post office box, or your business. So many of us will have multiple addresses, right? So when you think about that, you have your house, you have your work, and you may have a PO box where you can receive mail. And so some of these counties are sharing the same IP address. And what's interesting about that is that tells us that may not be the physical location of the building of where the county is operating out of, that is more than likely a website server that is hosting their website out of state or somewhere else in the state, or for example, an Amazon Web Service, Civic Plus, any of those types of companies, or even the Minnesota IT department as well. They will provide those services for counties. And so what that means is that that website is not at the county location and therefore is not next to the voting equipment. And so if those are separated, then it makes it more difficult for any type of voting injection to happen. And so that is a concern that we've had with Mike Lindell's data. We've been for months trying to reach out to Mike Lindell to be able to review that data and to confirm or point him in a different direction. Because we actually have the capabilities that if he has these PCAP packets, we could actually replicate those packets and put them into one machine and see what would happen over the fake internet, if you will, to be able to study and analyze what the capabilities of these packets are. So we've been unsuccessful in being able to get Mike Lindell or his team to be able to get us that information and be able to review it. And we would review it for free. We aren't looking to make money off of this. So that's where we wanted to kind of help Minnesotans understand where that was coming from. The other thing that is really important as we go through Mike Lindell's data is, as we kind of did the initial review, what's interesting in there is that there are times before the polls close claiming to have altered the vote totals. So that's an important note. Number two, there are dates after the election results being posted claiming to have altered the vote details. That's also a little bit hard for us. The biggest one that's significant, as I kind of related to earlier, is that we see a significant issue when we're reviewing Dodge, Pine, and Pipestone. On his spreadsheets over here, they all have the same IP address. So that tells us, because they're not actually next to each other. So for example, Dodge County is just outside of Rochester. And then Pipestone is near me, where I live in South Dakota, way out in the western part of the state of Minnesota. Then Pine County, those of you who are fishermen who like to travel up to Betty's Pies, just north of Duluth, you've driven through there, and that is north of the Twin Cities. So if you think about that analysis of the IP address is like your home mailbox number, you can clearly see that those three are not near each other. And so internet delivery, packet delivery, package delivery, if you think about that, requires that exact address. So that means these three counties are using the same vendor to host their website, is what we were able to conclude. And so with that, that creates a problem that potentially Mike Lindell's team is looking at the wrong location. There may be other reasons that they've posted it this way as well. But we have reviewed all 87 counties. We have determined the service capabilities and who owns the addresses. What we mean by who owns the addresses is specifically who's paying the bill for those IP addresses. And we have a cornucopia in Minnesota of service providers, as well as the Minnesota IT department, the state of Minnesota's MNIT group, that will actually resell services to the counties and cities, IT services such as web hosting, DNS services, email services, etc., to be able to help out the counties. And so that's important to know. We even see Amazon, Civic Plus, kind of running the gamut. And so that also creates an issue, because Minnesota has multiple vendors managing these web servers, so the possibility that all of them got it wrong is highly unlikely. So I want to make sure, because different vendors have different theories of how they do security, and they're at different levels. So whether they're doing it themselves, the Minnesota IT department, Amazon, Civic Plus, and so many of these other vendors that are out there, it's important to make note of that. The next thing that we'll get into is we decided to take a step back. So let's not focus on Mike Lindell's data, because we don't have any data from him. And even Senator Mark Curran has reached out to Mike Lindell to ask Mike Lindell to make a presentation to his committee, as well as some of the other committees that are out there. So Kiffmeyer has asked, and even the leadership in the Senate and the House has also asked, valid questions. And even some of the representatives went down to Mike Lindell's symposium, and they felt like they didn't get enough of the data. There's an asterisk there where many folks have intimated that there was a potential security issue there, and so Lindell was unable to get out the data. They had to deal with that issue first. So that's understandable. So absent of all of that, we decided, let's take this from a consumer affairs approach. So let's determine if there's actually an issue. So number one, are the addresses that Lindell has publicly out there, are they secure? Number two, are the taxpayers in Minnesota exposed with credit card security issues? Because there are some folks out there that are paying their county taxes through these county websites. There may even be other information that they could be signing on, permits, applications, all of those different pieces that normal citizens may do and interact with a county. So we felt that this was an issue, especially with these being exposed. So then we kind of discussed we should pick a well-known standard that we could evaluate the counties. And then we wanted to make sure that we used a reputable source, not D3, not R&G Visions, not any company in Minnesota, but let's use a reputable source to examine the vulnerabilities. You'll notice that we have the D3 Defense logo here because I want to make sure that people understand that we use D3 Defense and R&G Visions to basically, I personally paid for what you're about to see here. So we partnered with Security Metrics and the PCI compliance. The best way to think of it is it's credit card security. They will basically look at a website as well as internal audit processes where they'll ask questions to make sure that you are doing all of the right steps to make sure that you're keeping all of the credit cards of your customers secure. Okay, and so this is a standard evaluation that many banks have with their customers or the merchants that are out there. So if you have that little credit card machine or you have a computer that does credit card swipes or even a website, these are all things that you kind of want to look for in that regard. And then there's also some penalties that if you aren't PCI compliant, that means your insurance and your bank can basically say, we're not going to work with you anymore because you're not having enough due diligence, and you can even face fines in that as well. So Security Metrics is a great evaluator where they can help you on your internal audits. They can help you also with the scans of the outside of your websites and all of your different processes. And so they're one of our partners that we worked with, and we worked with them on this particular project as well. And so we also wanted to make sure that this was going to be basically a GSA approved vendor, so they meet all the government standards. So they've got it, no question on reliability, no question on due diligence, and they've also been a vendor that has been out there for a long time. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that up front. Now I'm going to get into the devastating part of it. This is our analysis of the 87 counties, as well as a couple other cities and the Secretary of State's office. What's really sad here is anything that's above that black line is our standard. Anything in red and yellow, that's a security metric standard. So anything in red is basically just flat out not secure, and you should not be doing any type of credit card work with these websites. And so that's pretty significant. That is literally over half of the counties in the state of Minnesota. So 45 out of 87 counties fail PCI compliance. That's a 52% failure rate. 6 of the counties fail at a level 10 critical failure. So basically, a level 10 failure is, yeah, you put anything on these particular websites, Aiken County, Lake, Lincoln, Todd, and Winona, as well as La Quiperi, that will be a significant no-no. And then we've identified 16 counties that are at risk with lower security implementations. What that means is that there's some secure socket layers, some certificates that are about to expire, and they're on the edge of some patches that are about to expire that they need to basically go through. 24 counties pass. They have minor issues where they may actually disclose what type of web server that they're running, and we would just ask that those counties clean that up so that you're not advertising what kind of server that you have, so that hackers aren't narrowing down the field to basically look for those vulnerabilities. Because there's vulnerabilities that come out every month, and that's why it's important for IT professionals to basically be patching these servers on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis, depending on the alerts that do come out. So far, there are 2 counties that have no issues, and they are secured via best practices, and that's Lyon and Nobles County. And so we want to be perfectly honest with that as well. And so those are the 2 counties that you see the little gold bars that are way below over here. Those are the ones that actually, we would say, have the gold standard, and so far are doing good work at the time of the scan that we did this in. The other thing that is actually really concerning that I need to make sure that people are aware of And this is the most damaging piece. We're willing to speak with the legislature as well as any of the counties and the Secretary of State. This line over here that you see, this is the Secretary of State's website, and we actually have documented evidence from security metrics that we can show, and we don't want to show that here, but there are exposures to being able to query a database at the Secretary of State's office, as well as being able to do injections according to the security metrics report that we got. A couple of these counties at the level 10, we were able to identify that their FTP access is literally in a plain text password, and that you could actually potentially capture those packets and see what the passwords are to those websites. There's also another county in here where the passwords for their email systems are actually in POP, SMTP, and IMAP. All of those logins are at a clear text as well and don't meet basic security standards. So the report is actually pretty in-depth. I'm not going to show the report on here because that would be bad for me to basically disclose all of the various vulnerabilities of each of the specific counties. But I will encourage the counties to reach out, and even the legislature. I'm willing to sit down and go through the report with the legislature. Now, the other thing that is important in this lesson is it's important that counties, state departments, the Secretary of State's office, they need to find somebody who they can partner with that will do an audit for them, either monthly, quarterly, or at least yearly, so that we can basically make this better for the consumers. You don't know what you don't know. My recommendation, especially in a state environment and county environment, I would recommend that you would want to do these scans monthly, just because there are new security breaches daily. And the different companies that are out there that can help guide you through this are valuable resources to help you with security. And so based upon this report that we see, I don't feel good at where Minnesota is at right now, especially when you only have 2 counties that meet the gold standard. And it's really not that hard to achieve, but due diligence is needed. And I'm very disappointed in seeing that the Secretary of State's office is exposed, especially when it's dealing with business registrations, licenses, and it's dealing with our elections. So when we talk about conspiracy theories, that bad of a score that we're seeing from the Secretary of State's office is reprehensible. And that scan was done on the Secretary of State's office on November 1st. So that is just as they're preparing to receive data for the 2021 elections for the school boards, county elections, and city elections that are out there throughout the state of Minnesota. So look forward to seeing everybody out there as we go out and continue to tour the state of Minnesota and talk about. We will certainly answer any questions the best that we can. Thank all of you, and God bless everyone. And let's just remember that we want to have a discussion of continuous improvement throughout the state of Minnesota. We deserve better as consumers.